This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting from Park City, Utah, where the Sundance Film Festival is underway. We're spending the hour today looking at the life of the young Internet activist, Aaron Swartz. It was a year after he tragically took his own life, and now a new film about him has premiered at Sundance called The Internet's Own Boy, the story of Aaron Swartz. We're joined now by Aaron's brother Noah and his father Robert. We welcome you to Democracy Now! It's a year later, but it's so important to share condolences because of the just tremendous loss that you have suffered. Robert, talk about Aaron and what you feel it's most important for people to understand.
I mean, there's lots of things to understand, and it's complicated. I think Aaron was interested in making the world a better place and changing the world for the better. And I think that's all that we have to do and can do to remember his legacy.
He took his own life. He committed suicide just over a year ago. Talk about the circumstances leading up to his death, what he was facing.
Well, he was facing trial for on felony charges from the federal government, and a really vindictive and, in many respects, nearly sadistic prosecution by the federal government, and which turned his whole life upside down, drained his financial resources, and terrified him with the prospect of destroying his future.
Noah, you too are a computer programmer. You've grown up in this household with computers since you were tots. Talk about the significance of Aaron's work.
As Ben Wickler is quoted in the movie, Aaron thought very firmly that he should work on what was most important in the world at any given time. And he really felt that he could do this through computers and through technology. And much of his work in the last 4 years had been around this. With Demand Progress and the SOPA protest, he built a whole framework for, specifically for Demand Progress, but basically for any activist organization that wants to maintain an email list, wants to be able to send actions to people, and sort of revolutionized this space with technology. In addition to working on things like Secure Drop. And
explain what's Secure Drop.
Secure Drop is a tool to protect journalistic sources by allowing them to submit articles anonymously and through an encrypted connection, or documents rather than articles.
Noah, you have organized hackathons. Explain what they are. After Aaron's death, we decided that there was lots of work still to be done, work specifically that Aaron had touched and work done by people that he had worked with that needed help. And so we organized a number of hackathons to help people figure out what they could do with technology and with activism. So we organized a number of hackathons. The idea is to have it either yearly or twice a year to continue Aaron's legacy and work. Bob, talk about Aaron's growing up, his worldview. It's a little odd to say, when he's growing up, his worldview as a 5-year-old, but Aaron really did have a worldview.
I don't know, I find these questions a little difficult. I mean, his worldview seemed to me to be normal and ordinary. And when people ask why he acted the way he did, it just seems to me peculiar, because isn't that the way everyone would? He was very curious. He was certainly very interested in computers.
A deep questioner, questioning when he was growing up school and its role.
Well, I don't think that's a particularly deep question. I mean, that's an obvious question. deep questions are much more serious. They're much more serious deep questions than that. I mean, that's not a deep. That's just clear.
Like father, like son. As Aaron grew older, the kind of work he did, truly remarkable. I mean, one of the founders of Reddit. And moving on, though, to talk about what happened in 2010, how you came to know what happened when Aaron was arrested, and the weight of the state on Aaron.
Well, I had landed in San Francisco for some meetings, and I got a call from my wife that Aaron had been arrested, and was just shattered by that news. I couldn't really think at all the rest of the day, and tried to learn more about what was going on. I guess initially, on the one hand, we were devastated because the notion that Aaron would be arrested and be involved in the criminal justice system was completely incomprehensible. But on the other hand, the notion was that we could get this resolved in some rational way. As time went on, that became clear that it was much more complicated than we'd ever imagined, and much more difficult. And the weight on Aaron in particular was immense as we struggled to try to resolve this.
Explain what you came to understand he did. I mean, when we talk about JSTOR, well, students in college understand what JSTOR is, but most people don't. Explain what it is and what he did.
JSTOR is a repository for scholarly journals. So if you take something like the American Mathematical Association's journal, JSTOR makes that available electronically on a subscription basis to primarily academic libraries.
Now, they didn't produce these articles, right? There are millions of articles that are gathered.
Right. No, the articles are produced for free by the academics, and the journals are edited and produced by the academic societies in general for free. JSTOR is not for profit, but nonetheless, they charge both universities and their subscribers and individual users for access to those journals. So it's very different than, say, a Disney movie where there are people who are paid to produce the content. The people who produce this content are never paid. And I've never met an academic who wants to see their work behind a paywall. The notion that the knowledge of mankind that is provided for free should be behind a paywall is completely wrong.
And explain what Aaron did.
So Aaron downloaded a substantial portion of the JSTOR database, or at least that's what's alleged, onto a computer.
I wanted to turn to comments of Aaron himself, made at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in October of 2010. He spoke about JSTOR.
I am going to give you one example of something not as big as saving Congress, but something important that you can do right here at your own school. It just requires you willing to get your shoes a little bit muddy. By virtue of being students at a major U.S. university, I assume that you have access to a wide variety of scholarly journals. Pretty much every major university in the United States pays these sort of licensing fees to organizations like JSTOR and Thomson and ISI to get access to scholarly journals that the rest of the world can't read. And these licensing fees are substantial, and they're so substantial that people who are studying in India instead of studying in the United States don't have this kind of access. They're locked out from all of these journals. They're locked out from our entire scientific legacy. I mean, a lot of these journal articles, they go back to the Enlightenment. Every time someone has written down a scientific paper, it's been scanned and digitized and put in these collections. that is a legacy that has been brought to us by the history of people doing interesting work, the history of scientists. It's a legacy that should belong to us as a commons, as a people, but instead it's been locked up and put online by a handful of for-profit corporations who then try and get the maximum profit they can out of it. Now, there are people, good people, trying to change this with the open access movement. So all journals going forward, they're encouraging them to publish their work as open access, open on the internet, available for download by everybody, available for free copying, and perhaps even modification with attribution and notice.
After Aaron Swartz's suicide, JSTOR expressed deep condolences to the Swartz family and maintained that the case had been instigated by the U.S. Attorney's Office. They wrote, quote, "The case is one that we ourselves had regretted being drawn into from the outset, since JSTOR's mission is to foster widespread access to the world's body of scholarly knowledge. At the same time, as one of the largest archives of scholarly literature in the world, we must be careful stewards of the information entrusted to us by the owners and creators of that content. To that end, Aaron returned the data he had in his possession, and JSTOR settled any civil claims we might have had against him in June of 2011. Bob Swartz. So JSTOR did not have a beef with Aaron.
That's correct.
MIT explain. Now, this is a place, MIT, that you worked for, and you were part of the MIT community. Your father did as well.
My father didn't work for
Your
MIT.
father had no relationship with MIT, but you did.
I still do.
So talk about MIT's role in this.
Well, first of all, MIT brought in the federal authorities. They worked at the direction of the federal authorities rather than, as was their custom, just which they did with another instance of this, of downloading of academic journals that was going on at the same time, disconnecting the computer and stopping it. They put a camera in order to build a case against him, and then continued to collaborate and cooperate with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the making of that case, where they fundamentally stonewalled us in terms of all our inquiries. We pleaded with them to intervene on Aaron's behalf and advocate that the case be dropped in a similar fashion to JSTOR, which went to the U.S. Attorney and asked that the charges against Aaron be dropped, and they refused.
Now, you had presumably sort of a way to talk to the higher-ups at MIT. You'd worked there for years. What was their response to you?
Their response was that MIT was neutral, which was nonsense.
Why is that nonsense?
Because they cooperated with the prosecutor. They provided the prosecutor evidence without a subpoena and a warrant. They violated any number of laws, including the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, Aaron's Fourth Amendment rights, the Massachusetts wiretap statute, the U.S. wiretap statute, among others, the Stored Computer Act, in the way that they proceeded in the case. They also refused to cooperate with us, give us evidence, and we had very significant difficulty even getting them to respond. And when we asked them to intervene on Aaron's behalf, they said they were unable to do that because there were multiple different perspectives about this on MIT's part, and therefore they must remain neutral. But in the report makes clear that MIT did not remain neutral and worked with the government.
Noah, what would you like to see MIT do now?
Lots of things. Mainly change the way they deal with this sort of playful hacking that goes on at MIT all the time.
Hadn't something like this just happened, where a massive downloading of information, where the student got a slap on the wrist?
I mean, things like this happen at MIT all the time. And
it's MIT, after all.
If you're an MIT student, you can typically get out of the way, and if you're not, apparently this is what happens. And if you're an MIT student who does this off campus, you get sort of the same result that Aaron did, which is a very overprotective response from the university, trying to distance themselves from any sort of backlash or association with, not illegal but questionable activities.
Aaron's partner, Taryn Steinbergner-Kaufman, joined us on Democracy Now! About a week after Aaron's suicide in January of 2013. I asked her to talk about Aaron, who he was, what he wanted, also how the upcoming trial had affected him.
Aaron was the person most dedicated to fighting social injustice of anyone I've ever met in my life, and I loved him for it. He used to say, well, why don't we do this thing? It'll make you happy. And he would say, I don't want to be happy. I just want to change the world. Open access to information was one of the causes that he believed in, but it was far from the only one. He fought for, during the course of this 2-year ordeal, he led the fight against SOPA, the Internet Censorship Bill, which no one thought could be defeated when it was first introduced, and which Aaron and millions of others together managed to fight back. And he did that all while under the burden of these bullying and false charges. He was just the funniest, most lovely person. He loved children. He loved reading out loud. That was one of his favorite things. He loved David Foster Wallace. He started trying to read me Robert Caro's biography of Lyndon Johnson out loud from the first volume. We didn't get that far because it's very, very long. One of his favorite books was Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, a fanfic, and we would read it to each other as chapters came out online.
That is Aaron's partner, Taryn Steinbergner-Kaufman, who was with us on Democracy Now! About a week after Aaron died last year. Your last thoughts in a moment after break. We'll be joined by Aaron's lawyer as well as the filmmaker who did The Internet's Own Boy. But, Bob, if you could talk about Aaron's goals and the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, a little more about it, the CFAA, what Aaron's law would be and why it's stuck in committee right now, and what you think needs to be done.
Well, I mean, I don't really understand Congress that well to explain why things don't get through, but gridlock in Congress is very well known. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act makes it a felony to violate terms of use of a website. So, for example, if you give your HBO password to someone else, both of you could become felons. And the revision of the act, among other things, is to change it so that this act can't be used by prosecutors to destroy people like Aaron.
Aaron, in the end, could have pled and maybe gotten 6 months in jail. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but yes.
He would have pled to felonies.
Yes.
And why was that? Did that mean so much to Aaron, what it would have meant to be a felon?
It's just incomprehensible, the notion that Aaron should be a felon and go to jail for something that was clearly not illegal, and he did nothing wrong. He was innocent. And to be railroaded on this basis was a complete distortion and corruption of the criminal justice system.
Noah, what do you feel people can do to continue Aaron's legacy?
I feel that in the film, and in one of the clips I think we played on the show, Aaron says, "I'm here to tell you you may feel powerless, but I'm here to tell you you're powerful. And with the work that I'm trying to do with these hackathons, a lot of people are and have been justifiably upset recently with Snowden's revelations, with WikiLeaks, with all these things that they're learning about how the world works. And I think Aaron's message that we can all take on with us is that there are things we can do about this. We can actually have an impact, and we can see the change we want to see in the world by participating rather than feeling helpless and useless. And so, watching the documentary, I see Aaron, but I also see all the work that he did and all the work that I could be doing and all of us could be doing. And I think that's the most important message to take out.
And Bob, as you watch the premiere of The Internet's Own Boy, the story of your son, the story of Aaron Swartz, with hundreds of people yesterday, what were your feelings?
Just being completely shattered.
I want to thank you both for being with us. Bob and Noah Swartz, the father and brother of Aaron Swartz. When we come back, we're going to find more out about the legal case against Aaron, what happened in the last months of his life. And we're going to talk to the filmmaker who did this remarkable film, The Internet's Own Boy. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. Back in a minute.